unless the property owner wants to seek the 25% tax credit, federal tax credit, in which case that goes through a review process. It's done by the National Park Service and the state SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, known as SHPO. And a determination is made there whether they're in compliance or not. Outside of that, if there's any, let's say, if there's any federal money involved in a project, that also requires a Section 106 review. An example of this was Clarkston. They were going to propose to widen M15 through Clarkston, which was going to drastically change that community as they widened it through town. They used, because it is also on the National Register, they used the Section 106 review, and the SHPO and the National Park Service determined that was an adverse effect, and they were not allowed to widen M15. So,
you would have taken the front of buildings off.
yeah, literally, yeah. Now, local historic districts, they impose the most restrictions, okay, because it's locally identified. A local group that's administered, and it's where most land use decisions are made, and you're a part of the land use policy making, and we'll get into a little more of that in just a minute. So how is it created? I'm not going to go through all this, but it is a very formal process. Anybody can request it. It is a committee that is appointed by the village council, and they are to survey and inventory, document all structures that they would like to see in the historic district. They will apply the National Register criteria, that is, I got these listed out here, associated with particular events that were major in the development and evolution of the village, could be associated with famous people, significant events, or embody distinctive characteristics in either in its architecture, construction, or whatnot. It has a very broad category. It also could include sites that were likely to yield or have yielded archaeological significance. So if you have a Native American burial ground here, they run into it, it's going to come under jurisdiction. So once that criteria is all determined and they've kind of mapped this all out, which we can help with, the draft report is prepared and is transmitted to the local planning board, the SHPO, the SHPO is State Historic Preservation Office, the Michigan Historical Commission, the State Review Board, and probably Village Council. They hold public hearings, and all those public hearings they'll take in public comments and then draft a final report, which goes to the Village Council. If the Village Council accepts it and creates a historic district, it automatically creates a Historic District Commission to oversee the protection of that, okay, if that makes sense. Now, historic preservation has been deemed in the public interest by the federal government, first in 1966, and has been reinforced by the United States Supreme Court. You're not taking possession of somebody's property. You're simply putting guidelines on how they can use it and hold it. It'd be very similar to zoning guidance, okay? I can't build an industrial building in a residential area, so it's the same concept. You're in charge of the exterior and external only, not on the interior. Can't make any judgments on that. Act 160 of 1970 gave Michigan communities, CVTs, communities, villages, and townships the right to establish their historic districts. So it takes it out of federal and out of state control and puts it into local control. Legal basis, again, the U.S. Supreme Court has judged it. This was the Penn Central case. I don't know how many remember that when I reviewed it last year. Quite an outstanding case in 1978. Went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they ruled that historic districts are within the best interest of the community, and it's not possession or taking of land, it's simply governing it. I'll let you read all this when you get the paper, but essentially. Okay, so why were historic preservation laws created? Well, it was primarily, as you know, to protect the nation's heritage. We, if you think back to the 1960s, we had the interstate highway system, urban renewal, and just the abandonment of our cities, our villages. And we saw buildings that were just deteriorating, and we were losing history. They were knocking these down using federal money. So the whole idea was to foster heritage, teach about it, learn about it, and actually attract visitors, which it has done. And I'll get into that in just a minute. Earliest preservation, it wasn't the first preservation laws that existed. Historic Act of 1935, Charleston, South Carolina, was the first local historic district created in 1931, even before the federal government stepped in. And then even the Equities Act of 1906, where I think was Teddy Roosevelt, created that to protect federal property, such as the Indian, cliffs dwellers. That was being destroyed by souvenir hunters, and so it becomes a federal law that that property is protected. Has it worked? Well, it sure has. Again, we just recently did a study. I say we, it was the State Historic Preservation Office and Michigan Historic Preservation Network, and they conducted surveys in 4 Michigan communities. I think it was Bay City, Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, and Battle Creek, I believe, I forget. But they took, within each of those communities, they took 2 neighborhoods, identical in everything as to the age of the housing, the size of the housing, even the school district was the same. One neighborhood was designated historic, the other one not. That was basically the only difference. They studied the property values over the course, I think, from 2000 on up to 2015, which, if you remember, that was the boom period, it was the bust, and it was the recovery. In every case, the historic designation added anywhere from 6 to 35% property value consistently throughout that time period. The full report I can get you if anybody's interested. So it does help on property values. It created a Main Street program in 1988, I believe, and currently, and Holly is a Main Street program. You join 2,000 other communities in the United States that also have that designation. It also has a historic tax credit, which has put $36 billion of private money into preserving 33,000 buildings to date. And it has created a $7.7 billion spent annually for heritage tourism. And the recent accounts shows that 40% of leisure travel is for heritage tourism. And in May of this coming year, well, 2022, Holly will host I think the 43rd annual Michigan Historic Preservation Conference. So that's going to be a 3-day conference, bringing in typically 300 to 400 people over the span of 2 or 3 days. Saturday, we're going to be devoting it to the Great Michigan Road Trip, which will plan tours and trip maps to everybody that participates throughout northern Oakland County. And I think your farm and the Heritage, Holly Heritage Farm will be part of that, as well as the Ellis Farm. There'll be tours, and I hope the restaurants will be humming, so, and shop local.
This is a very big deal. The Village of Holly is the smallest community to ever host a Michigan Historic Preservation Conference.
I never knew that, but that would make sense.
Well, that conversation came up with Janet the other day. She said, we've never come to it. But we promoted it so big to her.
Yeah. Well, it was funny. It was at a Main Street training session that was held there at the Vault. And this was 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now. And the state preservation officer came to Holly to sit in on the meeting, and so impressed with the downtown area, he spoke highly of it. We were in the running with Northville, and we were able to secure it as a vote at that that meeting, to have it, the, preservation covered
It's a
here.
big deal, we're excited.
Yeah.
I was at that. Yeah, they were really happy.
Oh, okay, yeah, so, yeah, it is, I mean, it's an honor to have it. I think next year, I shouldn't announce it, but just to show you what, you're in the group of Mackinac Island. So, not bad competition, you know. Anyway, that's coming up. So what do we do, as historic commissioners? Well, Local District Act 169 kind of outlines it. You're going to review the work that's on the exterior of any resource that's within the district, determine if it meets the Secretary of Interior standards. And as mentioned, we'll talk about that. Now, these are standards that are guidelines for the rehab, not for the preservation or reconstruction or anything like that, but we'll get into that. It's going to be your duty to make sure that due process of law that is fairly and equally applied to every applicant. It's not a matter of, well, my preference or that. It's following the Secretary of Interior standards and what's best for the property. You're to protect the historic resources and ensure preservation, to ensure certificate of appropriateness and notice to proceed or denial, and either a moving or demolition of any resource located within the district. You'll probably be having something like that to do with the depot as we begin that removal relocation process. The state or the National Park Service has already approved its relocation. You can allow variances, and you've done that in the past. Because of special conditions, it can be determined that those variances will allow the best preservation or best interest of the resource to be preserved. So you do have that right. And you will be notifying the applicant in writing, citing specific reasons of why they were denied, why the variances were granted, or why it was approved. You'll get into that. And this is going to be more and more important because now you may be dealing with the state historic tax credit. This is a tax credit for state historic dollars, and it's the only ones available to homeowners. Okay. They will be reviewed here first by the local HDC, but then it'll move on to the state SHPO office, and hopefully the two are in agreement that what you deny, they will deny. What you approve, they will approve. Last time this ordinance or the tax credit was in effect, they did have problems because they didn't always see eye to eye. And it's one thing when you approve it at the local level and the owner thinks, oh, I'm all set, and then finds out, no, it didn't pass at the state. Well, you know, what's going on? It's confusing. So we want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So this is, commissioners, what you're responsible for. Know the Secretary of Interior standards, again, for rehabilitation. I'll let you read all this when you get the copy, but just be familiar with the architectural styles. Kind of note the distinctive features and what's being proposed. Is it going to obliterate or change those features? If so, it probably won't meet the criteria. And review the applicants. Just don't do it at the meeting. I know this is a great one. I've sat on enough boards that I know, oh, God, I got that meeting coming up. Oh, I'll take a look at it now, just before the meeting. And it's not good when I do it. It's not good when you do it either. But I do
So
it.
we've developed a pretty good board. Most of us go to the site before we come.
That's great. That's great. So now we're talking about terminology. Remember, and we group it all under preservation. But there's also restoration, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. And let me talk a little bit about what preservation is. Preservation is repair rather than replace. And you may encounter all these on anything that you review. In fact, most cases, you'll be doing a little bit of each, because there will be some elements that you'll want to preserve. There will be others that will need to be maybe reconstructed, and yet others that are just restored. So what do we mean by preservation? Well, again, it's repair rather than replace. Rather than taking out this entire column, there's techniques that you can use that will repair. They'll keep that original column intact. So you always want to be mindful of that. Restoration, this is a tough one. This is usually held if you're really got some important buildings or the property owner really wants to take it back to what it looked like. This is the General Motors headquarters, where General Motors was founded in Flint, Michigan. This is how it appeared before it went in private hands. It was a 3-story structure. Now, the National Register said that the important date at this building was when General Motors was founded. And this is how General Motors looked when it was founded. So you can see they took off the entire 3rd floor and made it into an attic and put a hip roof on. Now this is pretty extreme, but they took it back to that particular period of time. And that's what restoration is. It's returning an element. It could be an entire floor, could be a piece of architecture, but it's returning it to what it was at its important period of time. Reconstruction, once in a while you'll run into this. I really meant to change this out because the Drayton Plains Depot was reconstructed and is now in Waterford in the Heritage Park in Waterford. This happens to be, well, George, you probably recognize this place, right? It's a little house in Appomattox, Virginia. Of course, this is where the Civil War ended. I believe that was owned by McLean. Ironic was the Civil War started at Bull Run. 2 battles were fought there, both of them on the McLean farm. And after the second, he said, I'm getting out. I'm tired of this war going on, and I'm going to move to a little quiet town in Appomattox. And where did he move? Here. And rightfully so, he could say that the Civil War began in my front yard and ended in my parlor. But this is reconstructed. Nothing is original about it. In the World's Fair of 1894, they wanted to, they did. They dismantled the entire house to reconstruct it or reassemble it at the fair in Chicago. It got there and the fair board said, no, we don't want that. And it sat in crates and it slowly disappeared, bits and pieces. By the time you got around to wanting to reassemble it, there wasn't enough there. So they reconstructed it. A little disappointing to me when I got there. So what you're going to be dealing with primarily, again, is the rehabilitation. And that's the act of taking a building that is maybe underused or not used at all and returning it to viability. For example, the one that you see on the right, that was a barn of Van Heusen Farm, and that is now a museum. The one in the lower left, that was a pickle factory, and that's now Mount Pleasant Village offices. So do we see the difference between what we're doing? Okay. So there's a lot more variance allowed in the rehabilitation than in restoration. Restoration, reconstruction, you're going to go to the nth degree to make sure it's accurate. Here it gives you a little more flexibility. Okay, Sectary Interior Standards. Ideally, the property should be used for its original purpose. And that makes sense because that means minimal change. To take a church and to convert it to doctor's offices doesn't make a lot of sense. An auditorium or a sanctuary converted into little pieces, it really destroys the architecture. So that is always good. It can't always be. Now, for example, the depot here in Holly, that's going to be rehabilitation, correct? We're not going to use it as a depot, but it's going to contain all the rooms that were originally there as a depot. They're just going to be used for different purposes. So, rehabilitation. The idea is to retain and preserve the character of the property, and the removal of any historic materials or features shouldn't be approved. New uses that require minimal change, and that goes back to the illustration I had with the doctor's office in a large auditorium or something like that. When the, when the proposed use is just too hard on the building or requires too much change. Properties do change over time, and the idea here is that property can have an addition and that addition can acquire historic significance in its own right. So it's not that you're gonna knock that addition off. They didn't have to do it with the Durant Door headquarters, but because they were restoring it to that particular time, they did. But that building could have been rehabilitated and that third floor allowed to stay. Distinctive features, we'll get into that, but again, those could be examples of craftsmanship of particular periods of time that are illustrated within the building itself. And those should be preserved, retained. Deteriorated features are features that are missing. Again, wherever possible, they should be repaired, not replaced. The repair shall match the old and basically everything. Hard to tell. Well, let me back up to that because it talks about replacement of missing features. Don't assume, for example, that this particular feature, somebody comes to you and they want to replace a handrail. Well, is that the original handrail? Well, we don't know. We don't know what the original handrail looked like. Well, don't conjecture something. Don't make something look older than what it is. Case in point is Springfield, Missouri, and this is Lincoln's home, the only home he ever owned. They've been taking houses down to restore that neighborhood to what it was when Lincoln was there. But when I was there, they had one house that was obviously built in the 1920s. And I asked them, I said, well, why aren't you taking that down? It's a newer house. They said, well, we think so, but we haven't documented it. We don't know until we can prove that it was in fact built in the 1920s, it's going to remain. We don't want to take something out. We don't want to conjecture about history. So the whole idea behind this, don't make something look older than what it really is. That's not savvy. Okay. Chemical, again, we get into a lot of sandblasting or power washing of wood siding and stuff. Those are pretty harsh treatments, sandblasting in particular. On brick, it will destroy the brick. It destroys the element that you're trying to preserve. Water blasting on buildings, we could make a whole segment on this, but typically it's high pressure, 2,500 to 3,000 pounds pressure. And that's enough to cut your hand. It will tear that siding apart. If you are going to use that, they recommend it 3,000 PSI. And that's about what a garden hose will produce. So always go with the gentlest means possible. Archaeological resources, again, those need to be protected if you run into that during construction. New additions and alterations, again, it should not destroy elements of the property that are historically important. The new work should be differentiated, not totally, but differentiate between what was old. Again, you don't want to make it look old. You want to distinguish it from the original property. And last but not least, the new additions or infill construction should be related, understood as new, but done in such a manner that if it's removed, it doesn't hurt the historic character. Case in point, we were working on Lapeer County Courthouse. And we had to get elevators from the, basically 3 levels from the basement all the way up to the courtroom level. Now, this is a very simple building, built in 1846. And it was basically a hall with 2 offices on either side of that hall, and then a courtroom on the third. We came in at the lower level, the basement, and actually from there we went up through the porch. We were able to enclose it. Now the columns were out on the porch. They had been enclosed in the 1930s, and we used that same shaft, and again, we kept the columns intact. If the elevator ever comes off, those columns are still intact, the original columns. So they're buried in the addition. Okay, so a little case study here. Somebody comes to you and they want to add a second floor. What's your thoughts on this? This is in a historic district, National Historic District.
Doesn't look too historic.
No, but it is.
I was gonna say it's classic, mid-century modern
Exactly.
architecture.
Yep.
You can put a second floor on it as long as you make it look different than what the first floor is.
Okay.
So you
Yep.
try, you don't wanna match it to what's already there.
Anything else to preserve it? And Jerry, you're right, because we're coming in, it's constantly changing, right? I mean, typically it's 50-year break off,
Right.
so this is now 50 years old.
Okay.
I hate to say we're all getting older, right? Anything else, Jerry? Or anyone? What about setbacks? Would it change this appearance of this if that second story came right out to the front? Well, the HDC thought it would, so this is what they ended up with.
Well,
Oh,
Okay? So it kept the street view. The owner got everything they wanted at the second level.
That building's a lot deeper than I thought.
yeah, I didn't think it was that deep.
Yeah.
I thought it was a small
It's a
building.
trick question there.
Yeah,
No.
I thought it was like our building.
I don't like it.
Okay, John Love.
But,
Wow.
That was hurtful.
John didn't like the stories that were added to the building by the Red Devil.
True.
okay, this is a house in a historic district. What they wanted to do was connect, let's see if I can get a, yeah. You can see this little kind of opening breezeway that connects the historic house to, again, a garage that was built later in time, but has received its own significance. And this is what they proposed. What would you do?
Well, I mean, if you're building that in the middle, wouldn't that ruin the exterior of the house?
Yeah.
Kind of made it look like an extension of what was already there.
Here's what was proposed. I think they built it. If you notice, the roof, let me see if I can get it. The roof right here was the only thing that projected out in front of the garage. And that was there originally. You can see it right here. So they said, save that portion of the roof, recess the rest of it, and rather than making it all siding, put windows in there so that it has this sense of airiness to it, and connect it. In your second floor addition goes, what they were doing was adding space on the second floor of the garage for a kid's room, like, and this was the second floor connecting. So was it more successful than what?
So is the bottom picture what they ultimately did?
No, that was what they proposed.
Oh,
So the next slide is definitely better.
do we have
So-
a picture of the house completed?
I don't,
Oh,
I
okay.
don't, sorry.
I was waiting for that.
Oh, okay, no, sorry. Well, it's just, you know, how you interpret drawings. And again, what were the key features? In the original, they were bringing this all the way out and it was hiding the garage. Very subtle, but again, it changed the relationship of the house in the breezeway.
I think a good example of that goes
Well-
along with this is the house over on College Street with the front porch. You go by there now, that looks so nice,
Mm-hmm.
what they
Oh.
ended up with as opposed to what they were gonna do in the beginning. And I've talked to the homeowner, she's just happy as can be with it.
Well, we did the window workshop too at, trying to think.
Andy's place.
Yes. And I talked to her after, and she said she can't believe the reworking those old windows did. That she said both sound and air infiltration is just incredibly cut and she really enjoys it. Okay, last one. Come to you with this building. Okay. What would you do? The owner said, I just want to do something with facade. What would you suggest that he would do?
Originally, they probably had windows on the
Yep.
front.
Okay. So would you put in little punch windows, double hung?
No.
No, I think those were.
Picture
display
windows.
Yeah.
Picture
Okay.
window of some kind,
Yep, storefront windows, yep,
and a new door.
and a door, okay.
Get rid of that mercury light.
And the light, yeah. Well, this doesn't look like it's in a shopping district. I see a house back there.
Yeah, it's just a little neighborhood commercial. Notice the brick,
Yep.
the brickwork? Now, the brick's been painted.
Mm-hmm.
So they cleaned off the paint, took it back to the.
Well, they could, but typically when it's been painted, you could also repaint it,
Yeah.
Yes.
you know? Removing paint can be very costly, and that's one thing you gotta check out, but we never recommend painting a building that has not been painted, because then it becomes a maintenance,
Yeah.
and it ends up looking like this. Well, okay, all the suggestions you, made are really, and this is what it looks like.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And actually, those storefront windows were there when they took off the,
The facade. We had one in town.
Yeah.
Wasn't that Blackthorn? When they
No,
put the,
Hoffman's building.
was it was it Hoffman's? Yeah.
Hoffman's building had all the old
The
stuff.
pillars, yeah, yeah.
so with a little paint and accentuating some of the brick detail work, it really makes a nice little neighborhood, store. Questions? You guys are doing a good job, really. I mean, you're doing it right. So, okay.
That was
Thank
really
you.
cool. I really like that one. That's cool.
Yeah, it turned out nice.
Oh. All right.
The end.
The end.
You needed the end slide.
That's all,
We
folks.
were all ready for more.
Oh,
So thank you for the presentation, the
Yeah.
refresher.
well, I
Yes, thank you
hope
for
it
your help.
helps, and happy to do it anytime. I know I owe George,
I think this commission has come a long way since I've been on it, and we have some projects in the village that we can refer to where we've helped homes stay the course. We've helped some homes come back from some of the unfortunate remodels of the late 50s and early 60s when everything just got covered up and wiped out. This commission has allowed some people to put vinyl siding on a house that had steel siding on it because it got it closer to where we wanted to be. And then through some of those projects, we've got original window appointments, we've got porch lines back, we've got the project down at McCanny House this summer. It was just probably one of our bigger success stories in what we achieved with that house. So these educational opportunities that you've afforded us have been very helpful in people understanding. Our next job is to start reaching out to the community and those people that live in the historic districts so that they too can understand how this affects the community. So, Mr. Campbell, I want to thank you as always for taking the time, walking us through that. I'll look forward to you emailing that. That's some things we can use in
Yes.
the future. I think I'd even like to create,
I'll forward it.
I think I'd even like to create some photo opportunities of some of the projects we've done.
no, that's a good idea. You forget very easily how far you have come,
Well,
what a difference it is.
the board changes, people come and go, and as it goes, it's nice to be able to say, here's some of the things we've done. And we'll have to look at doing that.
I don't know about that McCanny house though.
That's a problem.
So, Mike being on this commission definitely helped. We didn't have to go after him to beat him up. He just called one day and he said, you better come over here. They had no idea what they were gonna find under that. And the work this summer has been great. And fortunately with Mike being on the commission, we didn't have to go back and put the skids on. He knew the minute he unburied it what he had. So, again, Mr. Campbell, thank you for the presentation. I'm gonna go to public comment now. We don't have any public necessarily, other than the employees of the village that are here. I do wanna, we don't have any old business or new business. I do have a report, from, Nicole.
So I do have a report from Nicole, George, but I also, this evening, in front of you, you will see an email that I received. I'm not sure if you were on that email chain, but I left it in front of you this evening. And this is just a public hearing for the new state historic preservation tax credit. It will be held December 10th. in the Lake Michigan Room at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation Building, 300 North Washington Square in Lansing. So I thought it would be appropriate to entertain it to this board this evening, just as information. Secondly, you asked a question regarding the CLG status. We are making headway. Unfortunately, we are not completed yet. We still have a couple more things to complete, but we should see that completed here in the very near future.
Okay. We're going to want to attend this hearing in December on this. I've been to Lansing a couple of times and testified in committee, getting this through. Are you familiar, Ron, with what they're looking for here?
I think so, and it's also gonna be a session, probably not as complete, but it'll be a session at the MHPN conference.
Yeah, but this is before the conference.
Right.
They're looking for, so, what's that lady's name? Xanadu Zhao?
Oh, I don't know.
Is she the one putting this on?
Oh, Shohan?
Shohan.
No. This would be probably Amy Arnold that would,
Oh, Amy Arnold's doing this?
well, I'm not sure, but there'll be somebody from the staff there.
Oh, okay.
So there is a hyperlink at the bottom. Obviously, you'll have to enter that, but you'll be able to get more information and review any rules for that.
Okay. And with those two reports out of the way, do you have any other comments for us, either from you or the staff?
I do have one more comment. Obviously, this meeting, I believe, was held, no, we're on schedule. Next month, the meeting is scheduled for 12/9 at 7 p.m. So make that note. As we stand right now, we do not have anything on the agenda that is up for review. And I don't anticipate the CLG status being completed by that. So we are going to hopefully have that completed by the January HDC meeting moving forward. So unless the committee or the chair has a request for December's meeting, at this time, there is no agenda.
Okay. Josh, did you tell me you didn't receive,
No, I got it. I left it in my apartment. I was rushing to print it when you called.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
okay, because Tim Turpinning, while we were in the meeting, mentioned that he never received tonight's agenda. He didn't know anything about the meeting. I usually get mine in the front door, and I didn't get one this time. Now, doesn't mean that with the wind and weather it didn't blow away, but
I would like to ask the other commissioners present this evening if they received theirs.
I did not. I got the electronic one,
I
which
got
is
the
fine,
electric one.
but I didn't get the electric.
The officers always know where to find me, so. You just hand
You
it to me.
were, it was delivered to you though?
To my shop, yeah.
Okay. I will look into that and find out why those were not hand delivered. But our office staff is very diligent about getting those timelines out, and we
well,
will follow
like I
up.
said, I heard from Mr. Turpinning, he's in Saginaw tonight, so he wasn't able to make it, but,
Would you like to make a motion
Did
to
we
excuse him?
I never did hear from Perkins. That's what I was gonna say, because I've heard from him and I have his explanation written. I thought we should make a motion to excuse him from the meeting. So moved by Josh Murphy.
Yep.
Seconded.
Thank you.
Second by Mr. McCanny. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and I have yet to hear from Mr. Perkins. So, that being said, are there any comments from the commissioners? Mr. Murphy?
No, I like the presentation.
Mr. DeSessa?
Yeah, again, thanks for the refresher, it's great. With the convention coming up just locally here, I just wonder if that's an opportunity for us as our panel to do something there or have some sort of role. And maybe that's already in the works. I mean, you're obviously, probably have some involvement, but
Yeah.
I'm not privy to those conversations. I'm wondering if there's, again, I realize there's resources and all that, people have other things. I'm wondering if there's something, just we can have an event there or have some involvement, because we're like hosting it in a way, right?
Sure.
So maybe it's something that can be on the agenda for the next meeting. Now, look like we're not gonna meet in December, I get it, but maybe January, February, because this
Well-
thing's in May, right?
We can talk to because we've been working on put them together and see what, I'll talk to Janet.
There's a vendor showcase too. People.
Well,
That may
may-
be something that public, but there could be a booth or something like that.
maybe we could set up a booth showing some of the projects right here in Holly that we've helped
Yeah.
get accomplished in some of those picture boards like I was talking about.
And it might be a great opportunity to educate the public on the application process,
Yes,
the
absolutely.
HDC parcels and districts with each one listed, that they can come up and they can check their properties to verify if it is.
Did we ever find the large map? That's just crazy.
We can get you
Okay,
one. I don't have some kind of-
Okay.
okay,
All right, cool.
Mr. McKinney,
Great
Okay.
comment.
Good.
okay?
Really?
Then if there's nothing else to come before this board, I want to thank we have two new ladies with us from the village. Would you take a minute to introduce yourself?
Lisa Lawrence?
Lisa Lawrence, are you going to be the new
Yes.
uh,
HDC liaison?
HDC liaison?
HDC liaison? I didn't know what the title, thank you. And
I'm Megan Jones, just shadowing so I can learn more
Megan
about
Jones, so backup.
backup, yeah.
Okay, good. All right, well, thank you, ladies. I hope you found some things to be interesting in that presentation.
Oh, yes, very, yes.
All right, and we will go ahead and close this meeting at 7:55.
Thank you.